See, take a minute to breathe and come to a halt, chosen ones, as heaven leans toward you right now. No, your presence here is not accidental. It is no accident that you are hearing these words. This is a divine appointment, a moment that was written into your story long before you were aware of it, in the hidden realms of eternity. The Spirit of God has called you to this area because you are about to undergo a supernatural transformation. Something invisible is advancing toward you, bringing with it the kind of prosperity that comes from obedience rather than effort, as well as breakthrough elevation. The vision is for a specific time, as mentioned in Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 3, and that moment is currently unfolding in your life. The Anointed One. Heaven has marked this juncture as a turning point. The pressure you've been feeling and the confusion with which you've been dealing with the weight on your heart are all signs that something wonderful is about to emerge. Lift your spirit. Keep your breathing steady and open your heart, for the revelation that God is about to unveil will not only validate your intuition, but will also cause the release of what has been awaiting it. Prepare yourself. Heaven is communicating. The message I'm about to deliver was whispered to you long before this time, long before your bewilderment, long before your inquiries, and long before the war over that person began. So, chosen one, listen to me with your spirit, not just your ears. It is critical that you understand a reality that is frequently overlooked in the midst of the frenzy of life. Heaven does not choreograph meaningless interactions. God does not weave randomly arranged threads. There is no such thing as an unintentional collision in the life of someone who is marked by divine assignment. You did not meet that person by chance coincidence or emotional drive. It was a matter of alignment. It was an appointment. It was arranged from outside your vision. To the chosen one, take a moment to ponder with spiritual clarity rather than nostalgia. Remember the first time your eyes met theirs, your voice touched theirs, or something in your spirit was moved when they came into your life. It's conceivable it was subtle or sudden. Perhaps it was a strange sense of recognition, as if you had met previously in a place beyond time, or a pleasant familiarity that you couldn't explain. I am familiar with that sensation because I have experienced it myself. I recall the moment when God connected me with someone who not only entered my life, but also into my mission. I couldn't understand it at the time, and it's probable you did as well. However, upon thought, it becomes clear that the moment was crucial. The assignment was completed at that time. During that moment, a prophecy was delivered. This is why you cannot ignore the events that have occurred. The connection was never prevalent. It was never informal. The enemy's knowledge of the dangers of this link precedes your own, as proven by the spiritual tug-of-war that has ensued since. You see, chosen ones, some partnerships are formed out of curiosity, convenience, or comfort. They disintegrate, collapse, and shrink without resistance. However, there are relationships that are the consequence of divine guidance, and they do not fade away silently. They provide an incentive for conflict. They awaken hidden realms. They start assignments. They incite the enemy. This is precisely why you've felt confusion, pressure, doubt, or a strange gravity that makes you wonder if the fight is worth it. I am aware of the weight that I bear. I've felt the sensation of staring at someone God has connected you with and wondering why this gives you anguish. What accounts for the intensity of this experience? What is the cause for my inability to simply withdraw? However, you already know the cause in your heart. It hurts because it's significant. It is holy, which is why it feels heavy. Heaven created the relationship which makes it significant, and the permanent consequences of what heaven creates. Let this sink in, chosen one. When God sends someone to your destiny, you do more than just meet that person. You come across a mirror, a catalyst, and occasionally a key. Occasionally, they hold a glimpse of the future you've been hoping for. They occasionally function as a reflection of the areas of your character that God intends to improve. And occasionally, and please hear me, they hold spiritual meaning that your mission cannot unlock without accord alignment and unification. The enemy's reason for fighting it is as follows. He avoids criticizing what is unimportant. He does not devote efforts to tasks that do not pose a risk to him. He refrains from participating in spiritual combat with partnerships that lack prophetic substance. But when two destiny collide, two mantles entangle, and two callings coexist, the enemy sees the threat before you see the purpose. He detects the rippling impact before you notice the original rush. He notices the generational influence before the first signs of fruit. As a result, he unleashes an attack. He distorts. He whispers. He enlarges every fissure. He sows seeds of despondency. He uses emotional wounds as leverage, misconceptions as bait, and silence as a weapon. I am aware that you have quietly considered the topic, why is it so difficult when God is involved? However, difficulty does not imply contradiction. Warfare is not an act of rejection. Resistance does not constitute divine denial. It serves as confirmation. When heaven issues a decree, hell opposes. When God unites, the darkness trembles. When a connection holds fate, the opposition employs stratagem. This is why the bond appears to be unbreakable even during storms. This is why, despite the passage of time, you continue to think about them, perceive their essence, and feel an attraction that defies reasonable explanation. This is because the connection was made in the invisible realm before you met in person. Connections are formed over time and in eternity. The one you are defending and forced to relinquish was formed in the limitless past. Furthermore, the following is the message that God requires you to receive at this time. This is sacred land on which you are now standing. Your emotions are not the only aspect influencing this connection. Misunderstanding, timing, and disappointment aren't the only issues. This person is related with a mission. Every encounter is tied to a certain assignment. Every struggle carries with it the underlying power of destiny. This is about more than just your feelings. It's about heaven's plans, the enemy's worries, and your future needs. As a result, the instant you finally accept this, everything begins to alter. Selected. As we move forward, I encourage you to look deeper into the awakening that heaven is attempting to instill in you, as the struggle surrounding this link is not haphazard, arbitrary, or unintentional. It was computed. It's deliberate. It's metaphysical. And the more you understand the full enormity of the situation, the more you'll understand why it's been so exhausting and why it seems easier to give up than to fight. When God places someone in your life, He is doing more than just providing you with friendship. He is entrusting you with a supernatural partnership that goes beyond emotions to include purpose, legacy, bloodline healing, and generational transformation. And anything with such great power will inevitably face opposition from the underworld. There's a reason you've felt an inward pull toward them, even when distant silence or confusion appear to separate the two of you. Obsession is not the right word to describe the urge. It is an acknowledgement. Your spirit is aware of an idea that your mind is still trying to understand. Your spirit recalls the verses written by heaven before the creation of time. I can make this assertion because I have personally experienced it. I've had the type of connection that lasts, despite the fact that many circumstances seem to weaken it. I have experienced the misery of demanding clarity but being confronted with silence. Furthermore, I have come to the strange awareness that regardless of the problems that arise, an internal component refuses to separate completely. This is not an indication of emotional fragility. That is spiritual awareness. Chosen one. It is critical to recognize that each major connection is accompanied with spiritual design. Unfortunately, certain designs are written with such divine authority that the adversary can recognize them before you can. This is why attacks might escalate unexpectedly. This is why old wounds can suddenly reappear. This is why doubts can come at night when one's defenses are down. While darkness cannot destroy what God has established, it can try to sap your hope, undermine your commitment, distort your viewpoint, and alter your understanding of the circumstance. On occasion, the enemy does not need to strike with force. He just whispers recommendations that sound like your own thoughts until he persuades you to abandon an activity that heaven never intended for you to do. This is why judgment is important. This is why patience is so valuable. This is why prayer is so valuable. The opposition does not routinely use chaos as an offensive method. He occasionally uses deception to launch an attack. He presents rational reasons that appear sensible, but they lead to premature surrender. He reactivates insecurities you thought were resolved. He uses quiet to convey the impression that you are rejecting him. He invokes recollections of earlier failures in order to persuade you that the story's ending will be comparable. And he understands that if he can influence your decisions, he may undermine what God is doing by moving your focus from purpose to suffering, promise to frustration, and divine time to human impatience. However, as the chosen one, please listen to me. This is not your typical conflict, and you are not dealing with an average connection. When there is more resistance, the purpose becomes more profound. The destiny that lies beneath the confusion is as loud as the confusion itself. Spiritual duress increases as you get closer to a breakthrough. You assume the storm is attempting to destroy you, but it is actually showing the enemy's appreciation for your relationship. He would not waste his time if it had no purpose. He would not bother if there was no effect. He would not be bothered if it had no future. The evidence is your battle. Furthermore, I am aware that you have considered the rationale for God's decision to allow such intensity, given that it was clearly decreed. I used to ask the same question until God showed me that purpose cannot be sustained on weak grounds. What is designed to last must be improved. It is critical to determine what is meant to influence. The design of something meant to interrupt generational cycles cannot be entirely based on emotional impulse. God allows specific storms to strengthen rather than destroy you. He permits certain silences not to punish you, but to improve your spiritual listening. He allows delays not to discourage you, but to even out the timing on both sides. He sometimes allows the distance to mature both hearts, assuring that when the relationship stabilizes, it will be founded on substance rather than sentiment. Take a deep breath, chosen one, and listen to your essence. The stress you are feeling does not signal failure. It is a sign of an impending transition. You are carrying a big promise, and that is why you are doing so. The spiritual exhaustion you feel is caused by the fact that the calling associated with this bond is more extensive than you expected. The enemy is seeking to weary you by influencing your willingness to participate in God's plan, which he cannot block. This is why you should not leave your position. It is critical to keep a spiritually aware, emotionally grounded, and prophetically sensitive mindset. There is more going on than meets the eye. Heaven is at work in the background, altering viewpoints, healing scars, removing impediments, and uniting hearts. The relationship may appear static, yet it is actually in motion on a spiritual level. Although it appears peaceful, it is spiritually in the process of being constructed. God is affecting areas in you and them that will be important in the next season. What looks to be fragile is being strengthened by him. He is mending something that appears to be beyond repair. He is ensuring that both of you are prepared to align at the opportune time. Maintain your composure, chosen one. Heaven has not asked that you shoulder this burden alone. You're not having a mental collapse. You don't realize how important this connection is. The conflict has been so heated because something magnificent is on the line. And you'll soon be able to see the result of all of this. Selected. As we continue to investigate this revelation, I'd like you to understand an idea that has the ability to dramatically change your perspective on the situation. The issue you are experiencing is not due to an improper connection. It indicates the magnitude of the relationship. It indicates that the assignment associated with this individual is significant and beyond your comprehension. Heaven and damnation both seek a purposeful connection. This is the reason you feel conflicted. This explains why emotions fluctuate like waves. This explains why some days are marked by a sense of divine assurance and others by uncertainty. You are fighting against a prophecy, not an individual. Selected. Are you aware that some of the most powerful connections in Scripture face the most intense conflicts before they reach their desired outcome? Consider David and Jonathan, two people who are joined by divine intervention, but are constantly beset with external pressures, misunderstandings, and danger. Consider Ruth and Boaz, whose lives are entwined in the midst of a grieving process and foreign territory. Consider Mary and Joseph, who were called to carry out a heavenly mission that resulted in spiritual struggle, political jeopardy, and social upheaval. Destiny calls for conflict. This is why your heart is strained, your brain is tested, and your spirit is pressed on all sides. You are currently located on a spiritual training ground. God is not only preparing you to receive His promises, but also to keep them. Furthermore, maintaining a divine connection requires a level of spiritual stamina and maturity that is not derived from ease. Under strain, it develops. It appears throughout the waiting time. It develops during times of quiet. It emerges during storms that force you to rely on God rather than your emotions, preconceptions, or reasoning. I'm aware of this because I've been through a delay that seemed like being in the woods. I've prayed petitions that felt unanswered. I've maintained connections that were impossible in the physical sphere but were undeniable in the spiritual realm. The very situations that threatened to derail me were precisely when God was shaping me. Chosen one. I urge you to recognize the holy timing of the crisis you are currently facing. Divine connections frequently go through a testing phase before moving on to a transformational phase. This is where the enemy tries to generate dread in the security system and promote withdrawal. This is the point at which your spirit is divided between trust and tiredness. This is the point at which you begin to wonder if you misinterpreted the goal, misread the indications, or misheard God. However, what if, like Joseph in prison, David in the cave, and Ruth in the field? This is not the end of the story. Rather, it is the point at which fate begins to pivot. God follows a constant pattern. He allows pressure prior to elevation. He allows uncertainty before clarity. Before achieving contentment, He allows for significant internal growth. This is because the promise can only be fulfilled by a heart that has been purified enough to sustain itself without splitting. God's bond with you is significant. This is not a transient condition. It is not built on the foundation of superficial feelings. It is a spiritually constructed entity with the capacity to drastically affect the rest of your life. That is why it is polished with fire. Be careful, selected one, not to take the other individual's quiet as abandonment. God occasionally places both of you in a situation in which He must speak louder than they do. Sometimes silence is caused by alignment rather than distance. Occasionally, quiet is not a sign of rejection, but rather a sort of preparedness. The pause is not always the end. It can also serve as the transition to the next chapter. In certain cases, the separation is not a kind of punishment, but rather a precaution until both hearts are ready to absorb the energy that heaven is releasing. I understand how agonizing the waiting process can be. I understand that the human heart yearns for answers, reassurance, and tangible progress. However, spiritual development rarely emerges as advancement in the natural world. It appears to be uncomfortable. It appears to be an indication of resignation. It appears to entail putting one's trust in God when there is no logical explanation. This experience is so overwhelming because your spirit recognizes that you are in the presence of something sacred, heavenly, and long-lasting rather than fleeting. Chosen one, the antagonist wants you to focus on the absence of something, whereas God wants you to focus on its development. You're being sculpted. They're currently being formed. The alliance is now being established. The ambiguity will then be clarified. The impression of being delayed will be interpreted as perfectly timed. The overwhelming will appear to be predetermined. The calm mental murmur that encourages you to persevere as well as the seeming breakthrough are not the product of your imagination. It serves as confirmation. Selected individual, please keep your job. Heaven is not yet complete. The story continues to progress. Furthermore, the upcoming events will make every moment of endurance worthwhile. As you continue to navigate this season, Chosen one, I urge you to know that the tension you are feeling is not just emotional upheaval. It is spiritual resistance that is slowing the process of bringing something from heaven through you. Your heart is divided between the want to cling on and the yearning to let go for a reason. The cause for this is deeply embedded in the invisible realm. As you get closer to revelation, the adversary makes more forceful attempts to interrupt. The adversary attempts to increase the misunderstanding when more details are aligned by heaven. As your spirit begins to recognize the truth, your flesh begins to feel the pressure. However, duress is not your enemy. Pressure indicates that something sacred is forming beneath the surface, something that the enemy is desperately striving to disrupt before you can fully understand its function. This is why you are unable to regard this season as frustrating or disappointing. It is critical that you approach it from the standpoint of purpose. You must understand that the heaviness you are feeling is not a sign of weakness, but of calling. I've had seasons where I felt obliged to surrender because the burden of the struggle was too much to carry. I've asked God in the quiet hours of the night why something so spiritually significant should also be so brutally straining. Nonetheless, God delivered the same lesson in each instance. Elevation necessitates perseverance. This relationship is a huge assignment, and heaven does not delegate significant tasks to unprepared humans. Chosen one, listen with your spirit. God has connected you with someone who is not ordinary. Even if they are not fully aware of it, and you are not fully understanding it, there is a link between them and your future that transcends human logic. This is why you can't emotionally or spiritually remove yourself from them as readily as you do with others. This is why, despite your best efforts to move forward, your thoughts keep returning. This is why, despite your best attempts, your heart can sense their absence. The relationship was made in the spiritual realm, not the natural world. Emotional fatigue cannot sever spiritual relationships. It is critical that you notice that the adversary is using subtle strategies to attack you. He is using not only outward conditions, but also internal misgivings to create a barrier between you and the mission that God has set in your life. Despite the fact that his questions appear to be rational, they are based on fear. He is reawakening insecurities that you thought were long suppressed. He is using your past emotional wounds to persuade you that this connection will eventually fail because your previous experiences have taught you to expect failure. However, the enemy's deception is only effective if you ignore the truth about your identity and the group to which you belong. Your past chosen one does not define you. Old patterns do not limit you. You are no longer swayed by the cycles of brokenness that once surrounded you. You are picked for fights that others would fail at, filled with purpose, anointed with strength, and marked by God. As a person with this level of spiritual authority, the darkness tries to break you before you recognize it. The enemy's concerns about your future fuel the current battles. The resistance proves that your destiny outweighs your hardship. I am aware that the seclusion has been difficult. Silence can lead to assumptions, raise doubts, and amplify queries. However, quiet does not imply desertion. Silence is regularly used as a sort of preparation in the kingdom of God. It is the location where God works with the invisible. It is the habitat in which roots grow prior to the advent of fruit. The waiting room is where answers are delayed, not because God is ignoring you, but because He is coordinating specifics that you are not yet ready to receive. God occasionally allows stillness in the relationship so that both you and the other person can develop independently before they can grow together. The unseen can be beautiful, chosen one. Your natural eyes are usually unable to perceive the transformation that occurs beyond the veil. The interior work that God is doing in them may not be visible to you. You may be unable to see the recovery process taking place in their heart. You may not see their spirit gradually becoming clearer. However, the fact that you are unaware of it does not mean that it does not occur. I have lived, prayed, and waited for a long time to realize that God frequently works in the shadows before displaying His masterpiece in the light. And this season is no different. It is critical that you understand that abandoning a relationship does not just end it. It would disrupt a divine harmony. It would sever the developing fruit of years of spiritual preparation. It would shorten an undertaking that aimed to have an impact on generations beyond your own. God is encouraging you to persevere not for emotional comfort, but for prophetic fulfillment. Your fortitude serves more than just you. It is for the destiny that is associated with your name. Feel encouraged, selected one. A shift is underway. Something is in motion. There is a favorable alignment for you. And paradise is now more accessible than ever before in terms of offering clarity to today's complex conditions. Take a determined position. Be steadfast. You're standing on sacred ground. Chosen one, as we move on to the next phase of the revelation, I ask you to consider the idea that the current state of turmoil is a divine construct. As you can see, heaven regularly constructs in a way that appears to be destructive before becoming a blessing. In order for what is intended to endure to be strong, God dismantles what is incapable of supporting the future. Despite the fact that your emotions may be overwhelmed, your spirit is aware of a more significant event. A restructuring is going place within you, within them, and within your relationship. Something is being purified to ensure that it can withstand the weight of God's mission for this link. Chosen one, keep in mind that the enemy isn't interested in your emotions. He's pursuing your fate. The emotional upheaval is simply the outward representation of a spiritual fight aimed at your destiny. The enemy understands that if he can persuade you to distance yourself from this person, he will be able to block a series of blessings, advancements, and generational shifts that God had planned for you before you were born. This is why the conflict remains constant. This is why the schedule appears to be off. This is why the misunderstandings are more severe than they usually are. You are not in a conflict with another person. You are dealing with the spiritual resistance that surrounds a divine mission. I realize how exhausting it can be. I've had instances where waiting was the most difficult act of obedience that God has ever required of me. There were days when the act of holding on felt like lifting a mountain with one's bare hands. Nights when my heart questioned why God would allow such a great deal of confusion about an event that He Himself had brought into my life. Mornings when I awoke with a sense of heaviness, and nights when I lay awake with questions that seemed to ring out in the void. However, I've grown to understand that God uses these seasons to foster discernment, endurance, and fortitude. He urges us to make certain that we do not crumble under the blessing when the breakthrough arrives. The discomfort you feel is not a sort of punishment. It is the process of preparation. God is stretching your ability to love without fear, to believe without quick validation, and to stay steady in the absence of obvious reassurance. This extension is necessary because the assignment associated with this link requires a version of yourself that is more spiritually attuned, grounded, smarter, and stronger than you have ever been. Similarly, God is extending them. They are overcoming their own fears, concerns, and storms. You are not the only person feeling pressure. Heaven is simultaneously touching both of you. It is also vital to understand that kingdom links frequently change. Recognition is the first stage in which your spirit senses something heavenly. The enemy then begins to resist attempting to twist the facts. Subsequently, God refines foundations, heals scars, and purifies motives. Finally, revelation occurs, and everything begins to make sense. Chosen one, you are now at the refinement stage. Refinement is the stage that comes before the miracle, despite the discomfort and occasional agony connected with stretching. It's crucial to remember that every heavenly partnership in Scripture has been tested. Moses and Aaron experienced opposition. Naomi and Ruth experienced grief. There was political conflict that David and Jonathan had to face. Mary and Joseph skillfully overcame spiritual enigmas and uncertainties. Resistance is unavoidable in all things divinely decreed. However, those that continue in the face of adversity are the ones who see the realization. Chosen one. I'd want to share a very personal story with you. During a moment in my life, God connected me with someone who appeared to be a part of my destiny, but the process was fraught with doubt. The relationship was genuine. Nonetheless, the timing was confusing. I wrestled, waited, prayed, and questioned. However, God later revealed that the delay was not an act of denial, but simply divine choreography. He was creating a story that required my patience, and they were transformed. When the stars aligned, everything that had felt like a burden became a blessing. This season taught me that God's timing is always accurate and never late. This is what I perceive for you, chosen one. Even when it appears to be dormant, God's time is active. The individual's purpose has not faded. The Spirit has kept the link. You are closer to obtaining clarity than you realize. You are closer to making a breakthrough than your emotions can see. There is more spiritual alignment within you than your current suffering can reveal. Avoid enabling the adversary to use fleeting emotions to undermine an eternal mission. Breathe. The task of God is not yet finished. Heaven is not puzzled. The story is not dissolving. Rather, it is reforming. And you will quickly understand why the conflict is so intense. Because what awaits you on the other side is deeper, more profound, and transformative than anything you could have imagined. Chosen one. As we continue to delve into the depths of this divine unfolding, I want you to recognize an important part of the season you are currently experiencing. The human heart usually misinterprets spiritual pressure as personal failure, when in truth it is a sign from above that a change is on the way. You are not ceding control. You're not in chaos. God does not desert you. You're currently being positioned. You're currently being prepared. You are being purified so that you can carry the promise with knowledge, strength, and endurance when it comes. And the connection you've been struggling with is part of that preparation, even if it might be overpowering at times. Chosen one, it is critical that you understand that the adversary is not concerned about the losses you have suffered. He is concerned about the benefits you are about to receive. He is not concerned about the confusion you are experiencing. He is concerned about the forthcoming clarity. He isn't concerned about the stillness. He is concerned about the disclosure that silence is planning. He is not concerned about the protracted wait. He is anxious about who you will become as a result of the wait. This is why your emotions have been strained. Your heart feels heavy one minute and hopeful the next, and your spirit is pulled to them despite your logic's efforts to ignore them. You are at a spiritual crossroads where every decision counts, and the devil is seeking to persuade you that surrender is easier than endurance. However, the picked vessel's paths are seldom straightforward. They walk the ordained one. This relationship is the topic of an unseen fight, and the intensity you feel suggests the presence of a supernatural force. When God chooses someone to be a part of your destiny, there is evident spiritual tension in the relationship. You feel it in your spirit before seeing it in reality. You sense a force beyond rational explanation. You feel a sense of commitment to them that goes beyond just emotion. You have a need to understand the reasoning behind the occurrences, even if the specifics are unknown, and the desire you have chosen is not a sort of emotional attachment. It's a type of spiritual recognition. I recall times in my personal path when God connected me with someone in an unexplainable way given the circumstances. There were intervals of clarity followed by periods of quiet moments when I felt completely connected, and moments when I wondered if I had staged the entire affair. I went through days when God seemed to be close to me, and nights when I wondered why there was so much doubt. However, upon consideration, I have concluded that God was not purposefully confounding me. He was encouraging my progress. He did not withhold information. He was improving my spiritual consciousness. In addition, the guy with whom he had connected me was a component of a more extended program that was not evident to either of us at the time. This is your life right now. Chosen one. The link that God has put in your life is the tool that is guiding you to a deeper level of spiritual growth. You are developing the ability to distinguish His voice in spite of your feelings. He is teaching you to trust His timing even while you are surrounded by quiet. You are learning the skill to wait without becoming overwhelmed by the weight of unresolved questions. You are learning the ability to pray with purpose, to battle with faith, and to remain steady even while your heart is fluttering. This is not an act of retaliation. This is a covert promotion. It is also crucial to acknowledge that the other individual is going through their own process, their own conflicts, and their own trimming. Their scars, fears, hesitations, and spiritual blind spots are being addressed by God. Although they may not express it, they may not say it, and they may not even be totally mindful of it. Heaven is working on them just as intentionally as it is working on you. Occasionally, the two of you are placed in different seasons concurrently, as the timing must be properly synced for the job to be performed. God is not only preparing you to receive them, He is preparing them to welcome you. Select one, take a deep breath, and allow this information to sink in. Pressure alone does not signify failure. It symbolizes promising possibilities. Confusion is not a reason to abandon the situation. It's a call to pursue God more deeply. The quiet does not indicate God's absence. He uses this strategy to broaden your spiritual horizons. You're not losing ground. Instead, you're gaining depth. You are not lagging. Rather, you are approaching alignment. Everything you are currently experiencing is part of a larger design. And if you could see what heaven sees, you'd understand why you can't give up right now. A supernatural transfer is currently occurring in your life. Your spirit is changing even if you don't realize it now. You are overcoming old notions, worries, and insecurities. You are entering a time of greater judgment, clarity, and authority. And the next chapter that God is writing is influenced by this relationship, this person that God keeps bringing to the forefront of your mind. Be steady, chosen one. Heaven is closer than you may realize. Furthermore, the future events will reveal the reasoning behind the battle's intensity. Chosen one. As we move deeper into the unfolding of heaven, I want you to understand that your heart's sensitivity is not arbitrary and your spirit's judgment is not incorrect. God has been preparing you to achieve a degree of alignment that requires both maturity and surrender. Furthermore, the link that you are currently having problems understanding is part of that spiritual climb. You are not bewildered by an error. You are perplexed because God is revealing things that your natural mind has not yet evolved sufficiently to understand. Contradiction often precedes clarity in the perception of destiny. As the chosen one, you must recognize the unique significance of spiritual missions that include individuals. When God beckons you to a connection with a generational influence, the warfare rises before the promise is fulfilled. The emotional pressure, spiritual heaviness, and mental tiredness you have felt are normal reactions to a supernatural fight. Your spirit is in confrontation with a prophecy that is anxious to be fulfilled, not with an individual. You are being trained via strain, as have countless selected individuals throughout history. There are times when you feel a sense of unity with this person, when their presence calms your spirit, and when you feel as if the two of you are linked by a power that transcends circumstance. However, there are times when quiet is suffocating, misunderstanding is taxing, and distance is unbearable. Spiritual formation is the characteristic of this dualism, not malfunction. God is using the tension to improve your discernment, fortitude, and ability to hear Him while your emotions are strong. My chosen one. I understand how easily silence may be taken as rejection. I'm aware of how easy it is to assume that emotional distance equals heavenly detachment. I've been in seasons where a lack of clarity has made me mistrust my own discernment. I've felt the stress of wondering if I misheard God, misunderstood His signals, or misjudged His words. However, I finally realized that God often reveals His intentions in stages. He gives you the connection first, then the conflict, and then the clarity. Furthermore, the resulting clarity regularly justifies the wait. You are in the intermediate stage where the battle is loud and the clarity is diminished. The antagonist wants you to assume that the silence marks the end of the story, but it actually signifies that the narrative is being rewritten. Before the two of you can fully embrace God's plan, there are issues in both of your hearts that He is addressing, healing, strengthening, and aligning. This phase of the process is sacred because it guarantees that the connection will be founded on the foundation of spiritual maturity rather than emotional dependence when it reaches a state of stability. Additionally, it is vital that you grasp that timing is a heavenly language, chosen one. God permits two individuals to perceive each other's spirits during particular seasons, even while they are physically separated. During particular seasons, God grants emotional distance as a means of enabling interior healing. Additionally, there are seasons in which God momentarily divides two paths in order to reintegrate them in a more strategic, resilient, and healthier manner. You're being positioned, not punished. Your spiritual posture, your petitions, and your perseverance during this season are all significant. Heaven is in motion each moment you select for faith over fear. The alignment is fortified with each decision to prefer patience over alarm. The enemy gives land each time you opt for optimism over hopelessness. Your obedience is causing hidden changes even if you are unable to see the results at this moment. I've encountered situations that appeared passive but were fact, spiritually dynamic. And all changed in an instant when God finally unveiled what he had been building. Years of waiting can be undone in a single beautiful instant. Chosen one. The connection you have in your heart is not dissolving. Rather, it is being refined, deepened, and prepared for the season God has planned. The enemy is aware of this, which is why he is waging a vigorous campaign to persuade you to relinquish what God has not rejected. However, it is vital that you keep a spiritual perspective. It is vital that you keep a prophetic belief. You must have trust that God is too intentional to construct an event of this scale only to see it crumble. Your spirit is unable to surrender its grip for a reason. The relationship is alive for a reason, even in the absence of sound. There is a reason why your heart remains connected despite the fact that your head attempts to go on. Purpose is the explanation. Reason assignment. Destiny provides as an explanation. You are bringing an object that was predetermined by the divine before you understood its significance. Regardless of how heavy it feels now, this weight will eventually be transformed into divine fulfillment, fortitude, and wisdom. Breathe deeply. Chosen one. The task of God is not yet finished. Heaven is not yet completed. Your narrative is not about to collapse. It is in the process of unfolding. And what is to come will be worth every tear, every instant of confusion, and every night of battle. Take a determined position. The breakthrough is closer than you might expect. Chosen one. As we continue our journey into God's revelation, I encourage you to expand your spirit even more. Heaven's preparation for you requires a level of resignation, serenity, and depth that only a selected vessel can achieve. It is critical that you understand that your experiences are not in vain. Every moment of bewilderment, every period of stillness, and every tear that fell unexpectedly has been accounted for, stored, and merged into the blueprint of your purpose. Even the relationship you are currently fighting to understand has been influenced by God's hands, not the hands of circumstance. And if it was made by God, no earthly power can destroy it. Chosen one, the way God is situating you is holy. You are not stumbling during this season. You are going through an unveiling. The duress is compelling you to reveal this information. The distance forces you to use discernment. The yearning compels you to devote yourself. The uncertainty is compelling you to give up. Every seemingly overwhelming feeling is a divine invitation to get more intimate with God's voice. This is the reason for the enemy's relentless attack. He is not attacking you because you are vulnerable. Your spirit is awakened, which is why he attacks. I am familiar with the sense of feeling as if the person to whom God has connected you is further away than ever. When the link is put into question, interactions break down into silence, and clarity is replaced by confusion. Nonetheless, relationships formed by the divine do not dissolve. They become increasingly profound. It's possible their expression will change. They may travel long distances over multiple seasons. They may be pruned and refined, but they do not vanish. Your spirit remembers an experience that your present season has yet to completely express. This is why you are pulled to them despite your rational mind advising you to let go. The human heart frequently yearns for simplicity. Unfortunately, destiny rarely reveals itself in this straightforward manner. Destiny requires depth, and this bond embodies depth. You noticed it from the start, the way their presence aroused something within you, the way your spirit responded before your intellect had a chance to evaluate, the way your peace settled around them like a divine confirmation. These were not emotional illusions. They served as prophetic indicators. Chosen one. The adversary seeks to misrepresent God's work. He uses confusion to hide clarity. He uses dread to suppress faith. He uses delays to create uncertainty. However, the enemy is powerless to change the text written by heaven. He can only confuse your perception for long enough to make you question the truth. Currently, God is encouraging you to prioritize your spiritual vision over your emotions. Spiritual responsibilities are consistent, whereas emotions change like the wind. Although you may not see it, God is working in them. God is touching their hearts in ways that you do not understand. He is easing issues you are ignorant of. He is softening the regions where previous wounds have developed barriers. He prepares them to embody a version of themselves that is true to the call on their lives. Each delay represents a miraculous adjustment. During each moment of silence, God works in hidden places. Each pause is a spiritual reboot. And I'd like to bring to your attention a little-known fact. Individuals often withdraw before their organs are prepared. They withdraw because they feel overpowered. They withdraw because they are worried that their own unhealed wounds will harm you. However, God uses the space to address difficulties that intimacy might otherwise reveal prematurely. You are not being disregarded. You are safe. I've been in situations where God separated two people, not because they lacked purpose together, but because He needed to establish their purpose separately. When God joins two destiny, He will not allow what He plans to build to fall owing to fractured foundations. This is why the delay is regarded as long. This is why the wilderness appears extended. This is why certain times appear fragile. However, fragility is not the same as failure. It is the location where God strengthens what human striving cannot. Your prayers are being answered, chosen one. Your protests are not being ignored. No, heaven hasn't gone silent. The angels entrusted to your destiny are now at work. Furthermore, the person for whom you are praying is getting spiritual interventions on their behalf, regardless of their awareness. Regardless of their objections, God is steering their course. Even when they pause, He directs their movements. Even while they are unaware of it, He is preparing their hearts. The reasons you are unable to quit are as follows. This is why surrender is not a viable option. You're conveying more than simply your emotions. You are accountable for a prophetic mission. And when God assigns something to your spirit, He gives you the strength to carry it, even if your emotions cannot fathom the weight. There is a shift in the atmosphere for the chosen one. Your endurance unlocks doors. Loyalty establishes alignment. Your patience generates spiritual momentum. The next phase is getting closer than ever to being disclosed in paradise. Avoid acting on your feelings. Follow the counsel that God has given to your spirit. Fulfillment is now more accessible than ever. One that has been selected. I want you to notice that as we go deeper into the levels of this discovery, the purpose of each experience you are currently having becomes clear. Randomness is non-existent. Nothing is squandered. There are no accidents. Even the emotional anguish you experienced as a result of this connection is part of the divine process. Yes, you are under strain. Yes, you are taking a test. However, you are also being purified, empowered, and aligned for a much higher purpose than you have ever known. Heaven does not exert this level of pressure to something that is temporary. The goal is to prepare for an occurrence with long-term consequences, one that has been selected. It is critical that you understand that the love ordered by heaven does not follow the standards of earthly love. It does not meet the standards of people. It is not in harmony with the physical surroundings. It proceeds in accordance with divine timing. It progresses according to spiritual maturity. It moves in sync with the alignment of the heavens. This is why delays must not be construed as denials. Delays in spiritual connections are often evidence that God is strengthening the foundation before releasing the fulfillment. There is a reason why your spirit awakens every time they are in your thoughts. There is a reason why your heart softens even after times of stress or misunderstanding. Even when distance tries to weaken the bond, there is a reason you feel a spiritual attraction to them. This is not a product of emotion. This is the work of the Spirit. Your soul recognizes a phenomenon that your natural timeline has yet to fully explain. Indeed, the adversary has tried to hide that acknowledgement. He has made an attempt to drain your emotions. He has implanted notions that are intended to erode your confidence. He has murmured lies that appear reasonable, but are founded on dread. He wants you to feel that letting go is the more wise course of action, that moving forward is the safer option, and that vulnerability is preferable than self-defense. However, the opponent, the chosen one, continuously fires the most powerful attack in the area where you are most vulnerable to a breakthrough. I'm familiar with the feeling of being on the verge of insanity, with one foot set in trust and the other in despair. I've had times in my life when I was convinced that God had brought me together with someone for a reason I didn't understand. However, the circumstances around me seemed to contradict this belief. There were days when hope felt heavy, and nights when prayer felt like a war. However, on that voyage, I learned an important lesson. God discloses destiny gradually because the weight would be too heavy to bear if revealed all at once. The unfolding of divine connections is akin to the process by which seeds grow, first hidden, then anchored, and eventually visible. Choose one. Take comfort in the fact that God is not a God of ambiguity. He may have made a link between your spirit and another person because of the existence of a purpose. His resistance to allow their presence to leave your spirit indicates that their job in your journey is not yet complete. If he continues to bring them to your heart during prayer, it means that heaven is still crafting the story. Furthermore, the opposition expects the upcoming event, which is why you face resistance. It is critical that you recognize that the tension you are feeling is not the result of emotional instability. The vibration of destiny responds to divine timing. The spiritual conflict becomes more intense as you approach alignment. The opposition anticipates that you would abandon the mission before the breakthrough. He anticipates that your exhaustion will cloud your sense of purpose. He believes that discouragement will undermine your tenacity, yet he is unaware that endurance is your anointing. Your tenacity, chosen one, is achieving more than you realize. It is triggering the response of heaven. It is weakening the enemy's position. It strengthens the spiritual connection. Every time you choose hope over despair, a change happens. Every time you intercede for someone, you demolish layers of spiritual interference. Heaven moves in places you can't see whenever you hang on to the promise God planted in your heart. I'd also like to discuss an extremely personal topic. I've seen God heal ties that appeared to be irreparable. After years of silence, I've seen advancements. I've seen hearts that appeared to be beyond reach suddenly return to the truth. I've witnessed God's astounding power when two people let go of their fear and allow heaven to rewrite the story. I've realized that God never joins two destinies just to let them disintegrate under strain. You have a unique link, chosen one. It is not prone to damage. This is not a disappearing phenomena. It is in the process of unfolding. It's experiencing a metamorphosis. It is maturing. It is currently in a condition of alignment. The clarity you have been waiting for will soon become clear. However, it is critical that you remain spiritually solid until that moment. You must retain your patience. It is critical that you maintain your faith rather than your fear, since you are closer than you may believe. Closer to the revelation. Closer to the breakthrough. Increasingly reminiscent of heavenly arrangement. Heaven is prepared to show you why resigning was never meant to be part of your narrative. I implore you, chosen one, to enable your spirit to absorb a truth that is frequently neglected during times of uncertainty as we continue to develop in this divine unfolding. The greater the splendor that lies on the other side, the more profound the conflict and the more profound the mission. What you are experiencing right now is not a coincidence, emotional instability, or misdirected connection. The weight of purpose pressing through the limitations of your heart serves as a reminder that this relationship is more than a mere circumstance. It's metaphysical. It's deliberate. It has been woven into the fabric of your development. Fighting for an individual isn't your goal. You are arguing for a new stage in your life. The enemy has sought to persuade you, chosen one, that the quiet between you indicates that the story is coming to an end. However, silence is one of God's most effective tactics. God is not receding when he goes silent. He is in the process of preparing. He is arranging, aligning, modifying, and healing in ways you cannot see. The stillness surrounding this link is not symptomatic of loss. This is the sound of construction. Foundations are being reinforced. Wounds are being addressed. Fear is being tackled. In the unseen realm, divine clarity has replaced the enemy's spirit of confusion. I understand that the expectation has been prolonged. I understand that the questions have been pretty noisy. I understand that there have been evenings when you have wondered whether your heart is betraying you, but the internal pull that keeps you from walking away does not indicate emotional weakness. That's spiritual memory. Your spirit retains God's words that were spoken before your mind could understand them. Your subconscious detects an insight that your surroundings have yet to confirm. Furthermore, this acknowledgement is not coincidence. It's foretelling. Chosen one. It is critical that you recognize that the enemy is constantly attempting to disrupt the progress that heaven is making. He cannot destroy what God has ordained, but he may influence your impression of what you see. He uses misinterpretation to create uncertainty. He uses delayed responses to provoke queries. He uses emotional weariness to get you to consider quitting. However, keep in mind that each time the opposition raises their assault, it indicates that you are approaching a planned point. Opposition is unavoidable when a breakthrough happens. Nonetheless, God is strengthening you in the midst of such hostility. He is improving your ability to love without fear, to wait without resentment, and to trust without continual confirmation. He is teaching you that heavenly relationships are maintained not through human effort, but through spiritual obedience. He is preparing you to be someone who can sustain the blessing rather than just receive it. Because the upcoming event isn't little. It is not superficial. It is not temporary. It is a union that was deliberately made. God occasionally allows connections to enter a period of separation in order to mend the places that would undermine the promise in the future. Perhaps he is mending your previous wounds, such as the fear of abandonment, rejection, and the worry of repeating past mistakes. It's possible that he's calming their concerns, such as the fear of vulnerability, the fear of responsibility, and the fear of putting faith in something sacred. When destiny is at stake, God does not rush the healing process. He heals with aim, thoroughness, and depth. Selected. What if I told you that the very things causing you concern right now are the same things God is using to align the future? What if the stillness is giving both of you the opportunity to grow emotionally and spiritually? What if the unresolved questions aid in the self-discovery that each of you requires? What if the distance protects the connection until both souls are ready to maintain it properly? God's tactics, while unpleasant, are always intended. I've gone through phases in my life when holding on was the most difficult act of obedience. There were times when I felt as if I lacked the endurance that God required. Periods in which the environment appeared to be in direct opposition to God's predictions. However, God consistently showed to me that what appeared to be a delay was actually a type of protection, and what appeared to be stillness was in fact a form of strategy. I am now alerting you that you are currently in one of those seasons based on my own experience and the prophetic prompting in my heart. Selected. Even if they don't acknowledge it, the person with whom you share a spiritual connection is aware of it. Their spirit is also impacted. They are accompanied with feelings of unease. When they think about you, they feel anxious about unfinished business. Even when people appear distant, God is working in their hearts. Even when their behaviors appear equivocal, their spirit awakens. The same God who stirs your heart also stirs theirs. This is why you cannot quit up at this moment. You have traveled an excessive distance. Your prayer has been quite deep. You have persevered with extreme commitment. Heaven is actively building something in which you have spent too much spiritually to abandon. Giving up now would be more than just an emotional surrender. It would mean spiritual forfeiture. God did not bring you to this point to abandon the job that He has created. Selected. Take a deep breath and set your foundation in this reality. No force in hell can separate what God unites. No attack can reverse what God has decreed. No uncertainty can disrupt what God has aligned. You are part of a divine entity. Something beyond your comprehension. Something that will be revealed at the most appropriate time. While you may not have a full knowledge of the situation, heaven does. Furthermore, paradise is not yet complete. The breakthrough is approaching. The alignment is nearing. Clarity is approaching. Furthermore, the goal of this relationship is to predict unforeseen events. Selected. Hold on. Heaven is closer than it seems. Selected. I want you to understand that this stage of your journey is not meant to weaken you, but rather to turn you into someone capable of bearing the weight of the magnitude that God has in store for you as we move forward. The connection that you are having difficulty understanding is not an emotional entanglement or a distraction. This is an assignment. Your fate is bound by a heavenly thread. Heaven has taken a purposeful approach to each lesson, turbulence, stop, and strain you have experienced because they are so significant. All efforts must ultimately lead to your spiritual elevation. Selected. At a certain point in every divine journey, God stops providing explanations and begins to refine them. He stops providing signs and begins to shape your personality. He stops confirming the promise and begins to prepare you to receive it. You are now in that location. You are currently in a location where the promise has been made, but realizing it requires a deeper level of development. And the person with whom God has connected you is part of that growth. You are not being treated cruelly. Rather, you are being transformed by love. I know you've inquired whether the depth of your feelings is spiritual or emotional, and whether the longing comes from God or your imagination. Regardless of whether the connection is based on destiny or sheer desire. However, it is critical to remember that these spiritual connections always work, to awaken the deepest levels of your soul. They do not crumble in the midst of dread, collapse in stillness, or fade with time and distance. They may sway, bend, or stretch, but they will not fracture. The link you share is the product of a divine purpose that existed long before you were able to recognize its significance. The opponent understands that this bond is harmful not because of romanticism, but because of alignment. When two chosen ones join together at God's appointed time, their unity becomes a powerful spiritual weapon. It breaks generational curses, awakens dormant bounties, alters atmospheres, raises purpose, and establishes a legacy. This is the reason for the enemy's relentless onslaught. He does not oppose your feelings, rather he opposes your destiny. As the chosen one, you must also understand that the weight of this bond is not designed to discourage you, but rather to help you grow. You are gaining the skill to love patiently rather than impulsively. You are learning to believe in faith rather than fear. You are developing the skill to surrender with insight rather than in confusion. These characteristics cannot be formed during moments of tranquility. They arise during times of strife. Despite the anguish, it is evolving you into a version of yourself capable of bearing God's promise without stumbling. You have attempted to retreat in the past, assuming that the isolation would bring relief. Rather, the anguish was intensified. That discomfort does not indicate weakness, but rather devotion. You cannot divorce what God has spiritually united. This is something that your consciousness understands. Your spirit is aware of it. Whether they admit it or not, the other person's consciousness is aware of it. Logic cannot account for the heavenly magnetism between you. The lack of clarity may be the most challenging aspect of this journey. You are not aware of their ideas. You are unaware of the information God is giving them. You don't know where the route will go. This ambiguity can be stifling. Nonetheless, its goal is not to cause you to suffer. Its purpose is to teach you how to trust God without seeking continual affirmation. The goal of uncertainty is to break your reliance on human signals, allowing you to become receptive to spiritual ones. God, the Chosen One, conceals clarity when he wants to improve discernment. When he wants to strengthen faith, he conceals specifics. He hides timing when he wants to teach surrender. He also conceals his movements when he wants to develop patience. Everything he conceals is meant to be magnificent, as is everything you experience. I want you to understand this completely. The other person is not exempt from the procedure. In addition, they are dealing with emotions, anxieties, wounds, time, and divine intervention. It's possible that they won't articulate it. It is probable that they will not understand it. They might even flee from it. However, running does not contradict spiritual commitments. The journey is just extended. You cannot see how God interacts with them. He is empathetically molding their attitude. He is facing their concerns. He's boosting their consciousness. And when the moment is right, they will gain the clarity that is currently lacking. You are not waiting in isolation. With you, bliss awaits. The angels in charge of your destiny are keeping both of you safe during this process. This tie is more directly related with God than you may realize. Each prayer you've said has been recorded and acknowledged, regardless of whether the manifestation has yet to occur. The invisible is in motion. In the silence, a revelation is emerging. Healing is happening in the background. As the chosen one, you should not underestimate your endurance. The enemy is terrified because of your commitment to keep the possessions God has placed within your spirit. You aren't vulnerable. You are not misled. You're not delusional. You have a spiritual sensibility. You have had a spiritual awakening. You have been chosen for this mission, on a spiritual level. In addition, I would like to address your tiredness. You are tired since the conflict has lasted so long. The duration of the process has exhausted you. However, it is critical to avoid equating exhaustion with loss. You're not defeated. You're evolving. You are not experiencing a loss. You are getting knowledge. You don't break any laws. You are currently undergoing construction. And once this season is over, you'll have a better understanding of why God allowed each situation. The object you're carrying is sacred. What you're anticipating is sacred. Your struggle revolves around destiny. Selected individual, please keep your job. Divine intervention is near. Uncertainty will soon be replaced by certainty. The weight you've felt will soon be replaced by a sense of purpose. The seemingly delayed event will quickly be viewed as precisely timed. The unseen breakthrough that has been developing will shortly be revealed. Your narrative is not inert. Your dedication is audible. Heaven is the home of literature. Heaven is in motion. The heavens are aligning. Furthermore, the upcoming chapter is considerably more magnificent than any you have seen thus far. The victory is closer than you may realize, chosen one. As we approach the end of this lesson, chosen one, heaven is unfolding. I want you to open your spirit with complete submission, because the word you are going to receive is not just encouragement, it is activation. Despite the fact that you have faced stillness, spiritual warfare, emotional stretching, and long nights filled with unresolved questions, you remain present. You continue to listen. You are still pursuing. You are still holding on to the thread God has placed in your spirit. Heaven has marked you for something remarkable, which is sufficient evidence. Individuals without a sense of purpose are unable to sustain this level of spiritual strain. Nonetheless, you, the chosen one, have persevered because you were meant for this mission. It is critical that you recognize that every obstacle, delay, internal debate, and moment of doubt about if you misinterpreted God has been preparing you for alignment. Heaven does not rise without preparation. Destiny is not achieved without refinement. Spiritual maturity is required for the formation of divine connections. The tunnel you took was not a detour. The training has been excellent. God has been preparing your heart to bear something holy, something heavy, something that cannot be handled with immaturity or rashness. This relationship is unlike any you have ever had, and it was not meant to be. It was made with aim, which needs a procedure. This season, the enemy has made a deliberate attempt to block your view, chosen one. He has attempted to confuse your spirit, tire your emotions, and distort your perception. He wanted you to go early, opting for a lower choice and concluding that the quiet meant God had abandoned the promise. Even when you were on the verge of giving up something within yourself, you refused to do so. Your reluctance was not a sign of strength. The Spirit of God was the energy that kept you stable. Heaven has helped you when you couldn't do so on your own. In addition, I want you to fully comprehend this information. You did not realize how important this connection would be. You did not mistake the divine influence. You did not form the spiritual link. The sensation you felt was genuine because it came from God and not from emotion. Long before your mind could understand it, your spirit recognized an eternal truth. That acknowledgement was a confirmation from heaven, not a human delusion. You were chosen to see what others don't, to discern what others ignore, and to pinpoint what others get wrong. That sensitivity isn't a disadvantage. This is your ordination. Chosen one. As this chapter finishes, God desires to emphasize that the story is far from over. What looks to be unresolved is not yet finalized. It is simply unfolding. The silence is not the end. It is the process of sculpting. Rejection does not occur from distance. It is the process of preparation. Tension is not a kind of punishment. It relates to placement. Everything you are experiencing is leading you to a divine alignment that will be understandable in the future. Heaven isn't delayed just to upset you. The heavens are aligning to bestow rewards on you. It is critical that you have confidence that God is at work in areas that are invisible to you. It is critical that you believe that the person with whom you are associated is going through unseen changes. God is breaking down internal barriers in you, and them reawakening latent gifts, softening unyielding places, and healing wounds. And when the appropriate time comes, the connection will not only be logical, but it will also produce results that beyond your expectations. Divine timing always reveals what divine silence previously concealed. I understand that the wait has been lengthened. I understand that the wait has been draining. However, I can guarantee you that your waiting was not in vain. The roots of the seeds you sowed in tears are growing beneath the earth. The prayers you whispered in the darkness are shaking things up in the spirit. Your perseverance is unlocking the blessings that were sealed for specific seasons. Your devotion is bringing heaven nearer. And the sight of your most intense adversity is about to become the setting for your most powerful testimony. You selected one are on the verge of a transformation. The version of you that began this season is not the same as the version that will leave. You are more spiritually grounded, perceptive, intelligent, and powerful. You've learned to hear God above the din, to trust on Him beyond reason, and to follow Him far beyond your comfort zone. And that growth was important because the version of yourself that has risen from this fire is required for the release that God is about to bring into your life. As we approach to the end of this part, I invite you to take a deep inhale and let this reality sink in. Heaven is not finished with you, not with this link. What seems unclear today will appear divine tomorrow. In the future, what is today burdensome will look to be intentional. When God reveals the entire picture, what appears to be a delay will appear to be perfectly planned. Chosen one, lift your soul and ready your heart. The season you are entering is not one of loss, but one of manifestation. You're moving from warfare to wisdom, from waiting to witnessing, and from extending to entering into destiny. Your long-awaited breakthrough is now within reach. Selected individual, please keep your job. Heaven is in motion. And your story is going to undergo a shift, chosen one. As we get to the end of this precious time, I want you to feel the divine release over your spirit. You are not exiting this video in the same way you entered. There was a change. Something has awakened. Something has started in the unseen. Furthermore, it is distinguished by the evident force of a supernatural transfer. You have arrived at the Kairos moment, which is the divinely appointed time when the delayed situation begins to move. The previously veiled becomes obvious, and the contested matter starts to unravel in your favor. You have not been overlooked by the divine realm. Heaven does not forget what God whispered into your spirit. The anointing that exists in your life is alive and active, leading you with heavenly precision. Chosen one, come out of this moment with your faith restored and your head held high. Maintain your composure. Maintain your loyalty. Continue to maintain alignment. The same God who made this link in your heart will offer clarity, restoration, and fulfillment in His perfect time. Do not challenge the information that He has confirmed. Please refrain from discussing the nature of His membership. When the divine instinct compels you to move forward, resist the temptation to withdraw. Additionally, before leaving, engrave this word into your soul. If this message spoke to the deepest depths of your being, please express your agreement. In the comments section, write, "I will not quit," as a vow of faith. If you want to stay connected with messages that are directly relevant to your future, please subscribe. Please give this to someone who requires verification today. As the selected one, proceed confidently. Your triumph is near. Heaven surrounds you. Selected individual, stop. Please do not proceed beyond this point. I'm writing a cautionary tale, not a recommendation. Tonight, God has a direct message for you regarding someone you've been considering releasing. Avoid abandoning that individual. Not yet. Not at this time. Not while heaven is still completing what cannot be seen. The adversary has suggested that it is time to withdraw. The connection is irreparable. The silence indicates that the event has ended. The pain suggests that it was never meant to be. However, those whispers are fabrications designed to persuade you to abandon your assignment before the breakthrough arrives. This morning, at 3:33 a.m., I was captivated by a vision that had a profound effect on me. I saw a battlefield of immense proportions. In the heart of that battlefield, I saw two people fighting side by side, shielding each other from the darkness but refusing to give up. Then I noticed one of them begin to lower their sword with a look of exhaustion and uncertainty in their eyes, as if they were ready to leave the conflict. And I heard the voice of God thunder across that battlefield. He said, "Tell them to remain seated." The battle is most intense just before the victory. The enemy is not launching an attack because of the connection's vulnerability. He attacks because of its potency. Hell is concerned about the purpose that I have united. If they surrender at this point, they will lose one step toward the breakthrough. Warn them not to surrender. That message was intended for you. Concerning the person who has caused you so much anxiety, please do not overlook this message. Please refrain from scrolling. The reason God is working so hard to maintain this connection will be lost if you leave before the seventh warning is revealed. Please stick with me to the end. This isn't an emotional issue. This relates to the assignment. Before we go any further, I need you to take action. Type "I will not abandon" the comments below. They are more than just typing. This is your spirit declaring war against the enemy's scheme. You are telling God that you will persevere until His purpose is fulfilled. The angels are eagerly anticipating your declaration. Type it now to subscribe immediately. Enable all notifications. The following video will give you the strength you need to face the challenges ahead. Without the support that heaven desires, you are left to fight alone. Subscribe now. This video wasn't discovered by luck. You discovered it because heaven intercepted your scrolling. God placed the person on your heart, and He has yet to complete the task He has begun. Please refrain from skipping the following section. The Spirit is about to reveal 7 cautionary tales about the importance of keeping your faith in that individual. Warning 1, the enemy only targets what is a threat to him. This serves as the first cautionary note. The battle's intensity demonstrates the strength of the connections. The enemy does not devote resources to relationships of little consequence. According to God, the enemy would ignore this connection if it had no meaning. Consider the obstacles that have been placed in its path. Distance, silence, confusion, misunderstanding, and pain that seems to have no cause. These aren't random events. These are strategic attacks. The enemy identified the divine blueprint in this connection before you recognized it. He has been working tirelessly to demolish it before it can serve its intended purpose, having witnessed the transformation I had envisioned. Consider the situation. What is the reason for such strong opposition to this relationship? What causes minor issues to escalate into monumental conflicts? What is the cause of the silence's heavier sensation? Why does the act of letting go elicit feelings of grief when logic suggests it should be a source of comfort? Because this is an uncommon connection. This is a kingdom assignment, which is always met with opposition from the enemy. Only to steal, kill, and destroy does the thief appear. John chapter 10 verse 10 activates your comprehension. Your relationship is not under attack from the enemy. He's attempting to undermine your assignment. He does not oppose your emotions. He actively opposes your future. If you leave now, he will achieve the victory for which he has worked so hard. However, if you persist, you will defeat every plan he devised to harm you. The evidence of the enemy's true intentions will be revealed within 21 days. There will be an event that will highlight the importance of this connection. Consider David and Jonathan as examples. Saul attempted to undermine their friendship, which was viewed as a threat by the enemy. Consider Moses and Aaron as examples. Their alliance was so powerful that Pharaoh attempted to separate them. Please consider Naomi and Ruth. Their bond was so sacred that fate tried to separate them. The divine purpose of all divine connections in Scripture was met with fierce opposition, as it always is, from demonic forces. The attack validates the value. This is the initial warning. Kindly avoid from skipping. The second warning is even more urgent. Second warning. God does not start projects he cannot complete. This is your second warning. It was not your idea to make the connection. A design created by God. God achieves what he intends. God says, I incorporated this connection into both of your narratives prior to your existence. I was aware of the obstacles you would face. I anticipated the anguish that would result. I was aware of times when it appeared that giving up was the only viable option. However, I was also aware of the connection's purpose. Also, I do not abandon my designs. I finish what I began. It's not a question of whether I'll complete my work. The question concerns whether you will stay for an extended period of time to observe it. This connection was not chosen at random. There was a more powerful force at work. A recognition that defied explanation. Logic couldn't account for the pull. A sense that something significant was happening that was not the result of imagination. God orchestrated it. God was associating his previous compositions. Furthermore, he does not remove the content he has compiled. He who began a good work in you will carry it out until the day of Christ Jesus. Philippians chapter 1 verse 6 are activated through this connection. The work of God is not yet finished. The story is not yet complete. In reality, the chapter that appears to end is only a transition. If you close the book now, you will never be able to read the pages that God has already written for the future. You will receive confirmation that God is still writing this story within the next 14 days. A moment of clarity, a word, or a symbol. Keep an eye out for this. God finishes what he starts. This is also a warning. Hold on. Please refrain from departing. The silence is explained in the third warning. Third warning. Absence is not represented by silence. This marks the third warning. God has not abandoned this connection, as evidenced by the peace you are experiencing right now. It serves as proof that he is operating beneath the surface. God claims that you misinterpreted my silence as neglect. However, I've been more engaged this season than any other. When the surface remains silent, the depths move. I'm softening hearts that were previously hardened. I am currently mending concealed wounds. I'm compiling breakthroughs that require a solid foundation. You feel an emptiness in the silence because you are unable to perceive the structure I am constructing. However, I am in the process of building something that will be well worth the wait. I've been suffering from the silence. The distance has been confusing. The lack of movement has made you question every aspect of your life. However, in God's economy, silence is never wasted. It's the season for underground growth. Despite the absence of leaves, the roots are growing deeper. Consider the seed that has been buried in the soil. It appears to be dead. It appears to have been forgotten. It appears that nothing is happening. However, transformation is taking place beneath the surface. The formation of roots is currently underway. Strength is being developed. Life is on the verge of a breakthrough. Your connection is currently in the seeding season, which requires patience. Please consider Joseph's incarceration. The dream came true after 13 years of silence. Consider Abraham's anticipation for Isaac's arrival. After 25 years of silence, the promise became a reality. Think about the Israelites who were in Egypt. 4 centuries of silence preceded deliverance. God's silence has never signified his absence. It has always represented the preparation of God. Jesus addressed your waiting. He stated, "A grain of wheat is nothing more than a single seed unless it ultimately perishes and falls to the ground. However, when it dies, it produces numerous seeds." In this context, what you perceive as death is actually the necessary burial that occurs before multiplication. Avoid disturbing the seed before it has a chance to develop. The harvest is approaching, but patience is required. Throughout this season, John chapter 12, verse 24 is activated. The silence is not the conclusion. The womb represents silence. What is currently being developed in the background will soon come into the spotlight. The silence will begin to break during this season. A word will be said. A door will open. Movement will resume. Absence is not represented by silence. This marks the 3rd warning. Kindly avoid from skipping. The enemy's strategy is revealed in the 4th warning. Warning number 4. The enemy is attacking your mind. This is the 4th warning. The most significant conflict is not between you and that person. The most significant conflict occurs within your own mind. The enemy is unable to destroy this connection directly, so God says he attacks it indirectly. He instills ideas in your brain. He whispers falsehoods that appear enlightened. He magnifies minor incidents into major issues. He resurrects past pain and presents it as present reality. He convinces you that the most unfavorable interpretation is always correct. That person has not been the focus of the conflict. Your point of view on that person has been the focus. You have been in a conflict with the wrong opponent. You assumed that the problem was with the other person. However, the truth is that the lies you had been telling yourself about them were the real problem. The enemy's attacks are not immediately obvious. He arrives with subtle suggestions, what appear to be your own conclusions, logical thoughts, and justified fears. He whispers. They show a lack of genuine concern for your welfare. If they loved you, they would have acted already. The absence of sound indicates that they have left. You are entitled to superior treatment. It is prudent to withdraw. Spending time with someone who doesn't value your presence is a waste of time. This is incorrect, as evidenced by the discomfort you feel. God would not subject you to this if it wasn't His will. However, these are not the characteristics of wisdom. These actions are intended to persuade you to give up the gifts that God has bestowed upon you. The adversary is good at concealing his identity. He presents deception as rationality. He portrays fear as a source of wisdom. He conceals deception as discernment. However, his voice consistently causes abandonment. God's voice remains consistent. You may be corrected by the voice of God. You may be guided by God's voice. However, the voice of God will never tell you to abandon what He has personally anointed. I was assigned to this connection and have observed the enemy's strategy, as Archangel Michael declared over your battle. He has been unable to demolish the structures God has created. As a result, he's been trying to convince you to demolish it on your own. He sowed the seeds for every idea of surrender. He whispered each conclusion of hopelessness. He understands that he can influence your decisions by corrupting your mind. However, you have the ability to take control of any thought. Utilize it. 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 5 activates your mind. We record all thoughts in order to conform them to Christ's will. It is critical to identify the fabrications. It is imperative to challenge the ideas. It is critical to keep the enemy from gaining access to your thoughts. Within 72 hours, a thought will arise that compels you to give up your efforts. Recognize its nature. Reject it. There is no truth to this. It's an attack. The enemy is attacking your mind. This is a cautionary note to stay until the end. The fifth warning reveals the real purpose of your struggle. 5 warnings. This is an assignment, not just a relationship. This is the 5th warning. What you referred to as a relationship, God refers to as an assignment. The severity of the situation far exceeds your expectations. I did not connect you with this individual solely for the purpose of companionship, God says. I made a connection with you for the sake of the kingdom. Something that cannot be born in any other way is the object of my desire to be born from this union. Healing, restoration, generational breakthrough, and testimonies. The bond's intensity stems from the fact that it corresponds to the assignment. This level of conflict is unnecessary in casual relationships. This level of combat is only required for divine assignments. God used divine partnerships to accomplish His goals throughout the Bible. Moses' voice failed, so he had to rely on Aaron to speak. Jonathan was critical to David's survival during Saul's pursuit. Ruth needed Naomi's help in determining her fate. Esther required Mordecai to serve as a reminder of her goal. Silas was required to praise Paul while in prison. Peter required John to accompany him to the empty tomb. None of these partnerships were beneficial. They all encountered resistance. However, each one was necessary for the fulfillment of one's destiny. What would have happened if Moses had abandoned Aaron? What if David had decided to distance himself from Jonathan? What would have happened if Ruth had chosen to return to Moab instead of staying with Naomi? The objective would have been forfeited. The assignment would have been unsuccessful. The destiny would have been unfulfilled. This person and you are not in a relationship on accident. You're compelled to collaborate. Assignments cannot be abandoned just because they become difficult. A soldier does not abandon the battlefield because the conflict is intense. When a soldier stays, it means the mission is worthwhile. He stated that Jesus had addressed your assignment. There is no greater love than the act of giving one's life for a friend. Sometimes giving up one's life means giving up the right to withdraw. It entails putting the assignment before your personal preferences. It implies advocating for someone, even if the effort is taxing. Love acts in this way. This is what's required for the purpose. John chapter 15, verse 13 activates your commitment. When you leave, you are separating yourself from more than just one individual. You drop an assignment. You walk away from your purpose. You disengage from the purpose God intended for your connection. The true nature of this assignment will be revealed within 21 days. The reason for God's connection with you and the goals He seeks to achieve. Hang on until you see it. This is an assignment, not just a relationship. This is the fifth warning, so do not disregard it. The sixth warning refers to divine timing. Warning 6. Failure to act now will result in the loss of future opportunities. The sixth warning is that the breakthrough is closer than you may think. If you abandon your quest now, you will miss out on the blessings for which you have prayed. God declares, I perceive the timeline that you are unable to perceive. This means that I am aware of upcoming events that you are not. You would not even consider giving up if I revealed the upcoming season. However, I need faith rather than sight. I require trust, not evidence. A breakthrough has been scheduled. The shift has been organized. The response to your prayers is now underway. If you withdraw at this time, you will miss one step in the process of achieving the result you have been seeking. The enemy is also aware of the timing. This is the cause of the increased pressure. This explains why the desire to abandon the task has become so strong. This is why your entire being is screaming for the end. The enemy is making one last effort to keep you from making the breakthrough, which he knows is imminent. Consider the Israelites who stood behind them at the Red Sea. They were confronted with an impossible ocean and Pharaoh's army. Every logical conclusion suggested that it was over. Every human calculation revealed that they were trapped. Every sane person stated that this was the conclusion. However, the waters were only a moment away from separating. Witnessing the impossible is just a moment away. They were only a moment away from walking through the water that would have drowned them. The miracle would have been lost if they had given up at that point. They would have died in the unknown if they had given in to the visible. You are at the Red Sea. The army standing behind you represents the pain of the past. The ocean in front of you symbolizes the uncertain future. However, God is about to divide the waters. Exodus chapter 14, verse 14 focuses on your circumstances. Please know that the Lord will defend you. Remaining motionless is sufficient. Don't give up just as you're about to make a breakthrough. Don't give up when victory is within reach. Hold on. Movement will be detected within 14 days. There will be changes. There will be a transformation. The process of parting will begin. Giving up at this point would mean overlooking upcoming events. This is the sixth warning. Stay till the very end. The seventh warning is God's final word. Warning number 7. You must not separate from what God has united. Please be advised that this is your final warning. This is where heaven's position becomes clear. God has personally invested in this connection. God says, "What I have united." No one should be allowed to divide. Additionally, this includes you. You are not authorized to renounce the anointing that I have bestowed upon you. You are not authorized to disconnect the items I have connected. You do not intend to demolish this. I am responsible for the design's completion. I'm aware that the anguish was genuine. I understand that the wait has been prolonged. I'm aware that the conflict has been intense. However, I ask that you place more trust in me than you do in your exhaustion. Please keep the items I've provided. I have not yet finished the task. This isn't just a relationship. This is a divine union. Before it was seen on earth, a connection was established in heaven. Human decisions are not intended to disrupt divine unions. Human obedience is intended to protect them. Jesus delivered the final declaration regarding your connection. He said, "I pray for those who are my own." I own this connection. I've been praying for it. I've been advocating for it. I've been working on projects that are close to both of my hearts. I will not give up the gifts that my Father has bestowed upon me. I also request that you keep possession of what has been entrusted to you. Do not abandon my design. Matthew chapter 19, verse 6 activates your union. Therefore, let no one divide what God has united. What God has united is not determined by circumstances, emotions, or convenience. This connection is the result of God joining. God-level commitment is required for connections that God has joined. The 7 warnings have been disclosed. The adversary targets the source of the threat. God finishes what he starts. Absence is not represented by silence. The enemy is attacking your mind. This is an assignment, not just a relationship. Giving up at this point would mean overlooking upcoming events. It is critical that what God has unified remains intact. You have been advised not to be scared in order to avoid making the mistake of walking away. However, I must issue one final cautionary tale. The enemy will make one more attempt over the next 72 hours. Something will happen that appears to be confirmation to let go of a moment of suffering, a thought of hopelessness, or a seemingly final trigger. Don't fall for it. It is the enemy's final assault before your breakthrough. He is making one final push because he is aware that the shift is approaching. Continue to resist it. Hold on. The breakthrough is approaching quickly. Immediately apply this warning to your life. Say this aloud. Your voice proclaims the words of heaven. I accept the 7 warnings you have issued over my life, Almighty Father, the God who unites and protects divine connections. I affirm that I will not abandon the person you've placed in my life. I will not abandon the assignment you have assigned to me. I will not fall for the enemy's deceptions. Silence will not be misconstrued for absence. I refuse to give up just as I was about to make a breakthrough. I submit all notions of surrender to Christ. I disregard any suggestion to leave. I am unwilling to separate the elements you have combined. I hereby affirm that I will remain steadfast until your goal is achieved. I declare that the enemy will not win the victory for which he has been striving. I affirm that the connection you've established will serve all of its intended purposes. I appreciate your warning. I appreciate your efforts to advocate for this connection. I am grateful for the upcoming breakthrough. I am determined to persevere. I will not relinquish control. I will remain confident in your abilities until I see the victory. In the name of Jesus. Amen. The heavens have recorded the declaration. I've sealed your commitment. The enemy's strategy has been revealed and a warning has been delivered. Now, complete the commitment process. Initially, like this video, this is not a discussion about numerical values. This refers to declarations. By pressing that button, you notify heaven that you have received the warning. Execute the action instantly. The second step is to subscribe and turn on notifications. Those who persevere will be treated to further revelations. Force for conflict. Perspective for the waiting. If you do not subscribe, you will miss the reinforcement that heaven desires to send. Subscribe now. Third, send this video to someone who is considering quitting. Someone in your life is ready to give up their responsibilities. They require this warning before making that error. Kindly forward this to them. Fourth, I will remain in the comments as you type. Show other warriors that they are not fighting in isolation. Allow the heavens to record your declaration. Please inform the enemy that you are unwilling to submit. Please provide the information at this time, selected individual. You arrived at this video exhausted and contemplating surrender. You leave with a divine warning that resonates in your spirit. Continue to persevere. Not at this time. Not when the breakthrough is so close. Not when heaven works so hard to keep you connected. The significance of the assignment has sparked a heated debate. The purpose is strong, which is why the pain has been palpable. The adversary has been unyielding due to his concern about the potential consequences of this relationship. Every tear you've shed has been meticulously recorded. All of your prayers have been acknowledged. Every moment you've saved has been accounted for, and no time has been wasted. The impending breakthrough represents the culmination of all of this. However, you have been warned and are now prepared. Keep the blessings that God has bestowed on you. Fight for what heaven is fighting for. Remain involved in the conflict until victory is achieved. The stillness will be broken. A breakthrough will occur. The objective will be revealed. Refrain from surrendering. You are too involved in the situation to resign at this time. Proceed with resolve. Have faith. Proceed with the understanding that God has not yet finished His work. The pinnacle of this relationship has yet to be reached. The purpose is still unfolding, and your breakthrough is closer than ever. Hold on. Amen.